and thank you all for being here. One of the best panels of the day, obviously.
Expectations.
Exactly. Not least because I'm joined by two very distinguished panelists who know a lot about this topic that we're going to talk about, but also the fact that they are founder CEOs of amazing companies. And really this topic is about how do we get companies to decarbonize themselves, because obviously that is the big topic of the day, amongst other things. So what I'm planning to do is really have a panel split into three, really talking about CEOs as being sustainability officers and why it's so important that it comes from the top. Secondly, what practical tips can you share with us, the audience, as well as people online, in terms of how you get companies to really commit to this and not greenwash? And that's obviously a topic in itself. And then thirdly, how do you empower consumers and your employees to do much more than what you would hope to set out to do? So with that, I wanted to sort of let the panelists, first of all, introduce themselves. So Tessa, why don't we start with you?
Great. Hello, everybody. I'm Tessa, co-founder and CEO of Olio. We are an app that exists to tackle the enormous problem of waste in the home. And we do that by connecting people with their neighbours so they can give away rather than throw away their spare food and other household items. And we have 4 million members in our community and counting.
And growing very quickly.
Yeah.
And only incorporated in 2015.
Yep.
And across multiple parts of the UK.
Across the world, yes.
So
we have had items successfully shared in 59 countries so far.
There you go. So quite staggering numbers. And Hayden, the founder and CEO of Bulb. Please introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your company, how you got about there. Yeah.
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name's Hayden Wood. I'm the co-founder and chief executive of Bulb. Bulb is a renewable energy supplier. We were founded in 2015 in the UK. The simple idea behind our company was that at the time, energy was broken. Customers were really upset with poor service, polluting energy, high prices. So we started out and tried to make energy simpler, cheaper, and greener. Our original business plan said that we were aiming to add 20,000 customers a year. And my co-founder and I were a little bit taken aback after a year and a half when we were adding 20,000 customers a week. 5 years on, we've grown to supply 1.7 million homes in the UK. We've realized that the software we've developed to operate our business in the UK can be used in many energy markets around the world. So we now also operate in France, Spain, and Texas. What more to say? We're still based in London. Very grateful for the support we received through the Tech Nation program. I'm not sure we'd be where we are today without it. There's now 1,000 people working at Bulb, helping our members lower their bills and lower their emissions.
Terrific. Well, look, that's a great start. And that gives you a sort of a sense of the kind of businesses that we're going to hear from. So let's start. And the one thing to note is on Monday, a fantastic thing launched. You may or may not have heard of it. It's called Tech Zero, which is led by Bulb, which is really encouraging tech companies to commit to their carbon emissions to be zero as quickly as possible, at least half by 2030, and obviously by 2050 to be completely zero. And there's a number of things you can go on the website and have a look at. It's on technation.io, but there's a pledge. And the reason I want to sort of start us off with that, what led you to take the leadership position on this and really encourage so many amazing companies to sign up immediately? So we've got Monzo, Oak North, Deliveroo, Habito. These are great companies committing to decarbonizing their own companies and their footprint. And we'll come to what that means in a moment. But Hayden, why don't you start with that?
Yeah, well, I mean, really it was, a combination of necessity and coincidence. So, necessity, Bulb, when we were founded, is a B Corp. As a B Corp, we commit to rigorous standards for social and environmental responsibility. If you don't know about B Corp, I imagine, actually, hands up who knows about B Corp in the room. Oh my God,
All
what
right,
a
so
great
that's
room.
90%.
Well,
That's
so
90%.
yeah, so I used to ask that question sort of
Yes.
at events like this, and you'd be in a room like this and maybe 3 or 4 people would raise their hands. So either things have changed a lot in the last few years, or we've just got the best of the best in this room. I think probably a combination of the two. So it was a necessity. So we knew we needed to do this. It's quite tricky as an energy supplier to do that because one of the things we sell to our customers is gas, and they use that to cook food and heat their homes. And as a B Corp, 2 years ago, we made a commitment to be net zero by 2030. And so we were working on this problem within the company, thinking, how on earth are we going to do this? And then in terms of coincidence, I just started talking to other founders about what their plans were for this and how they were doing it. And I just learned that we were all, whilst at the same time trying to sort of grow our businesses and deal with the sort of chaos that, doubling every 6 months or doubling every year or whatever, kind of growth that creates. That at the same time you have to change your business model and change the way you do business in order to avoid temperature change and the climate crisis. So we just thought, well, why not get together, share our experiences, share best practice, and help make the whole thing faster and more efficient for everyone involved.
Terrific. And Tessa, you leaned in, you signed up.
I did.
And tell us a little bit more. What made you do that?
Well, I was very enthusiastic to sign up because Olio's whole entire mission is about trying to solve the climate crisis. But I very quickly realised on day one that whilst we'd spent a lot of time measuring how much carbon we were saving, we hadn't actually measured our own carbon emissions. So I can remember the first meeting sort of furiously Googling sort of scope 1, 2 and 3 to find out what on earth it actually meant. And then as we've been doing the preparatory work on this task force, Olio has also been on a journey to measure our full carbon footprint. And kind of big shout out to the task force and in particular to the toolkit that is available on the website. Really, really helpful kind of step-by-step process that can guide you through that journey.
Especially on understanding scope 1, 2 and 3. I was the same actually. Hands up actually who understand or knows about scope 1, 2 and 3 about carbon emissions. Again, we're like, you're super advanced. But to the people online, maybe you could explain scope 1, 2 and 3 briefly.
Very briefly, sort of my understanding of it, thank you Google, is that scope 1 is sort of your own factories, scope 2 will be perhaps energy sources that you buy in, yep. And then scope 3 are the indirect emissions that are taking place as a result of your business, so perhaps employees commuting through to things that your end customers are doing in their homes perhaps with your product. And for the vast majority of businesses, actually kind of scope 1 and 2 is fairly easy to figure out and to measure, and it's the scope 3 that is actually where the bulk of the emissions lie, and so it's really, really, really important actually that any net zero commitments absolutely do include those scope 3 emissions.
We'll come to some practical tips about that.
Yeah.
But Hayden, why don't you explain CEO as Sustainability Officer? I mean, you clearly took the lead, and how is that going? How would you encourage other CEOs and founders, and also people within businesses to take a leadership position? I mean, this is, you're seeing great change. You obviously want to see it sped up, but talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah, so I'd never sort of thought about it like that, sort of Chief Sustainability Officer. I guess it reminds me, do you remember in like sort of the early 2000s, lots of companies had Chief Digital Officers.
Yes,
and
CDOs,
they had one person on the leadership team who was doing digital.
Yes.
And you don't really have that anymore, do you? Everyone in the company is expected to understand digital and incorporate the internet into the business. And for me, I think it's going to be quite similar around sustainability as well. And to be honest, when I think about Bulb and what my role as the chief executive, it's really to sort of set the tone and to sort of act out, be a role model and act out those values myself. So when I think about my role in this, we set up the company, we had a very clear mission to lower bills. It's quite a commercial point for our business, but second, to lower emissions. And then also by being part of the B Corp community, we don't just maximise shareholder value, we maximise stakeholder value. So making those choices set the tone for Bulb. And so that means that whenever we're having meetings and debates at Bulb about various decisions, when we make important decisions, we will consider the impact that that decision has on our mission. So does it lower bills and lower carbon emissions? We consider the impact that that decision would have on all of our stakeholders, not just our shareholders. And I, to be honest, it's a bit like the Tech Zero task force as well. Having like started it and set that tone, it's just very humbling to see what people then do with it afterwards. And they, when Tessa joined the task force, you started adding to it and taking us in a different direction. And at the start, it's like, oh my God! And now look where we are. It's just so much better. So I think that's the responsibility of the chief executive. I think. Sorry, I'm going on a bit too much now. But one other point I think that you have a responsibility as a chief executive is you're the connection between the board and the sort of the directors of the company and the executives in the company. So I think, as a chief executive, you're responsible for transparency within the company. So making sure that the decisions that are made by executives within the company are then, and the sustainability implications for that are then passed on to the board, and making sure that the board spends time thinking about sustainability for the company. So yeah, I'll pause there.
Well, I think one of the many things that I take away from what you've just said is that you really brought sustainability impact as a result of your business right into the heart of decision making when you're looking at your KPIs and OKRs and everything else. But it's fascinating to see that. I just question how many companies are doing that today. But what practical tips can you offer that you've learned from? I mean, I know we've just published our own emissions report, and it's been it's not been linear. There's been a lot of, right, what is this number and where does that number come from? And so, but any practical tips that you can share with the audience about how you've really set the target, got people going, and helped with decision making?
Yeah, so I think lots of companies are all racing to sort of throw targets out there publicly, and before you even do that, there's a couple of essential prerequisites. The first is that you actually just need to measure your baseline emissions. And I know that might sound obvious, but there's a really significant chunk of work that needs to be done in order to achieve that. And there's several ways in which you can do that. So you can either sort of designate someone internally to do that work, which is what we did, or there are a lot of online tools, or you can work with a bespoke consultancy that does this work. And I've spoken to other founders who are spending anywhere between sort of 5 and 25K with those consultancies. And again, you can find details of them on the task force website. So first of all, you've got to measure your baseline emissions. The second thing, kind of building upon what Hayden said, is I believe very, very passionately that if we stand any chance whatsoever of living in a 1.5 degree warmed world, then sustainability targets have to be a top 3 priority for every organisation. Not top 10, not top 5, it has to be in the top 3, because if it's in the top 3, it really will get done. When you then think about sort of what should that interim goal be, the UN Race to Net Zero has provided some really kind of helpful guidance there, which is that we should all be aiming to halve our carbon emissions within this decade. And then the sort of second part of your question was really about kind of how do you get this rolled out? And I think you touched on some really, really important points. Is I would look at your company values. Is sustainability and kind of the path to net zero kind of baked into your company values, and are they mutually reinforcing? So company values, and then the other thing I would really sort of recommend is being sort of very public and transparent about the journey that you are going to go on, and taking all of your kind of teams and employees on that journey with you. And back to the kind of what gets measured gets done. What gets bonused and incentivized also tends to get done. So I would look at those sort of classic incentivization tools and apply this to this area as well.
Terrific. And I think when you do take a look, and I'm sure you will take a look at the Tech Zero pledge, a number of things you've just spoken about are very much laid out in terms of having an executive sponsor on your executive team who's really sort of responsible for reporting on how the company is actually bringing sustainability impact into the business. Hayden, you talked about this, the fact that you're doubling in size, and when you're fast. By the way, Bulb is the fastest growing company in Europe, according to the Financial Times. So number 1 out of 1,000 that they analyzed. So that gives you a sense of the speed of growth that we're dealing with. How do you honestly kind of combine growth in the economic way of thinking of it with sustainability impact?
Yeah, I mean, it's very hard. We're very fortunate at Bulb. Every single member that joins us and gets their energy supplied by Bulb, by getting renewable energy supplied into their home, on average they save 3 tons of carbon dioxide a year. So our sustainability impact is woven into our product, which, to be honest, I think makes it a little bit easier for Bulb, because we can have that impact just by growing. But by going through this process, we started looking at all of the other things in our business, the building that we're in, the stationery that we use, the transport that people use to get around. And, you know, I think when you're growing quickly, and I think it's not, I don't think you need to be growing at extremely fast rates to already be very, very busy in your job. You know, I'm thinking about when Bulb was in its first couple of years, and you're a founder, there's 5, 10 of you in the team. Like, everyone's wearing 10 different hats. You know, you're doing like 3 different jobs. And if it's not urgent, you're probably not going to do it. And so I think one of the things that we tried to do then, and I still try and do, is not let the perfect get in the way of the good. And this is risky because you can be nervous about, accusations of greenwashing and things. But I think very often in fighting the climate crisis, we can let debates about what the perfect thing to do is get in the way of taking action now. And this is a race against time. We need to take action now. So when you're dealing with like really rapid growth, or you're very busy, my number 1 tip would just be to do some simple things that are not going to do any harm. So switch. I would say this: switch to renewable energy to supply your buildings. Look out for B Corps, for suppliers of different products. It's really easy to go to that website and find them. I would suggest those things as things that aren't going to add a lot of, many more items to your already too long to-do list.
I'll just build on that very quickly, because we're asked that sort of question the whole time at Olio. How do you balance profit with purpose? And people seem to assume that these 2 things that are just constantly battling with one another. And I like to say, well, that's the same as asking, how do you balance treating your employees well with growing your business? And we've sort of moved beyond that now, haven't we? We now all understand that if you want to be a successful high-growth business, you invest in your employees. And I very much hope that we are well on the way to stopping asking that question, actually, and understanding that in order to be a high-growth and very successful business, you have to have that purpose and that sustainability embedded into your business model and into your culture.
Brilliant point, and I hope that we won't be talking about this topic for much longer.
Here's to hoping.
Yes, and you're both consumer businesses, but you clearly would deal with the wholesale market on the other side. But how would you, what initiatives are you taking, especially for any consumer-based businesses here in the audience? How are you getting consumers to be a little bit more engaged, can do their part? Because obviously that's a huge part of the equation as well. Tessa.
There's so many things I could say in answer to this, but I think one of the most important things that we're doing is explaining to people that what they do counts. And it matters, because I think too many people feel overwhelmed, powerless, depressed, and they feel like, how can they possibly make a difference? And we are just constantly saying to people, billions of small actions got us into this mess in the first place. So surely by the same logic, billions of small actions can help get us out of it. And here's some tools and some ways in which you can really simply make those kind of swaps in your life to play the part and fight the good fight.
Yeah, that's a very good point, because I'm actually, for example, I'm a customer of Bulb, I have been for many years, and I do get these very simple emails telling me how much I've saved and how much I've helped decarbonize the economy in very, very simple terms that I can kind of relate to. Can't quite remember what it was, but they've been very helpful emails. Is that the kind of thing that you've prioritized?
Which animal did you get in your...
Yes, exactly. I can't remember.
I think the thing that, in my opinion, is just being missed in much of this climate debate is the fact that over 60% of greenhouse gas emissions are as a direct result of household consumption. And we never see the data sort of presented to us in that way. It's always presented in a way that's very hard to relate with by kind of industry sector, etc.
You include food in that?
Yes, absolutely.
And a big part of
food is a quarter of all global greenhouse gas emissions. But the point of that is the same one I was making before, which is that actually if we're going to decarbonise at scale, we have to empower everyday people to take easy decisions.
A show of hands, actually, who over the last year has sort of changed their behavior regarding what we're talking about? I mean, that's basically 90% again. Yeah, great.
This room, this group of people is going to save the planet.
Yes.
We've got, knowledge of B Corp, knowledge of Scope 1, 2, 3, taking action.
Top of the class.
I would say one other thing to add to this. So I'm so glad you like those emails, Gerard. That's great. The thing that we tried to do right from the start was be really positive about this.
Yes.
And
brilliant.
I think we have. It makes me really. It makes me really sad actually when I read about the number of young people who are anxious about the climate crisis, and then when you combine the number of people who are anxious about it with not knowing what to do, that just puts that I think is something that we can do something about, especially now with the other trials and tribulations that we're going through. So I think what we always try to do with Bulb is be really positive, point out the simple actions that people can take to do their bit, to not be to impress upon people the importance of this and the urgency, but to not nag, to not be or lecture exactly, and I hope that by doing that, more people will get involved. You know, when we started the company and we started seeing some of the more right-wing press in the UK start talking about renewable energy companies in a way that hadn't been done before. You know, readers of the Daily Mail and the Telegraph signing up to Bulb. That made me think, okay, this is good. We're no longer just talking to a niche of the 1% of homes who were previously purchasing renewable energy. We're taking this mainstream and something that more people want to be involved in.
Yeah, the key takeaway from what you're saying is to really inspire people rather than we're almost in danger of just finger pointing and lecturing and that just doesn't work.
We all share this problem.
Yeah, exactly. It's transcendent, isn't it? So, and what about employees actually? How are you encouraging your employees to take even more action? I mean, you're doing amazing things. You're very mission driven as an organization, so you've obviously attracted a certain type, but what else are they doing in addition to what you've encouraged them to do?
The team at Bulb, I find it's just so inspiring. So what have they done? We've had people in the company leave Bulb and start other businesses, which is very
leadership team.
Well, I don't know about that. They've worked out how not to do it, and they're going to go and do it properly. We've established Bulb Foundation, which donates money to organisations outside of Bulb, and then the team at Bulb also spend their time with those organisations and contribute to that. And then the other thing that we focus on is, everyone at Bulb spends between 20 and 30% of their time on improvement projects, and those improvement projects we call them Make It Better projects. At Bulb, there's a sort of portal for them in the company, and those will be projects that help our members reduce their carbon emissions. So actually, a lot of the new products that Bulb is releasing now have come from ideas that the team has had to help our members reduce their carbon emissions. So yeah, it's very humbling.
Wonderful, and I'm being told time out, but is there anything, Tessa, that you want to add to some of the things that probably sound very familiar?
Download the Olio app.
Yes.
Shameless promotion.
Exactly, why not? Actually, it is, I've been following you for a number of years, and it's amazing what impact you've had on communities. Yeah. And when you talk to people about it, they just can't believe that such a thing actually exists. Yeah. So,
yeah, well, and I think that's very typical actually of the climate crisis. It's not, there's been a lot of talk about technology today, and actually I don't think there's been enough talk about communities, and I think the magic is when you combine communities with technology. That's when we're going to solve the climate crisis.
Download the Olio app and please download Bulb as well. Thank you very much. Thank you.